In just 50 minutes from now, well within the hour, the moon is due to have visitors from another planet.
Former astronaut Wally Schirra at his side.
Man on the moon.
That moment, without Walter, inconceivable. Oh, boy.
Welcome back to Third Phase of Moon. Blake Cousins here. We've got a special report for you. Did the Pentagon just admit they have UFO debris in their possession? Well, there's a stunning admission by the U.S. government that says that it possesses UFO debris that was recently made in response to a Freedom of Information Act. A requested field over 3 years by this author from the UFOexplorations.com. This reply from the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency has ended the speculation by verifying that UFO material has indeed been recovered from the Roswell crash in 1947. If the implications are true, if this article is real, it's going to be an amazing ride here in the next few months in regards to the Pentagon admitting this. We've got the panel with us. Rich from Goof On, we've got Michael from Dark Hour Paranormal, and Dr. J from Dr. J Radio Live. Buckle up, everybody. It's going to be a wild ride. Let's just get to it and start it off with Rich. Are you excited about this incredible new information? Or are you a little disappointed that the Pentagon's not actually releasing this technology to the public?
Well, I'm a little disappointed, even though they're saying, they admit to having this. It's the information provided in this FOIA response seems to represent reports that are directly relevant to what was learned from the study of the UFO debris and how insight gained from those studies might be applied in the future, but it does not include a detailing of the found debris itself. It doesn't include much of what was requested in the FOIA request: physical description, the composition of the material, the origin of the material, the names of the involved scientists. All that remains classified. So I'm not really excited as you would think, because there's a lot of stuff missing. And to me, that's a little off-putting for me.
Yeah, Rich, you're exactly right. There's a lot of information that still has yet to been given to the public, but apparently the FOIA request was originally given in 2017, made to the DIA, asked for the physical descriptions, properties, and composition of the UFO, the UAP material held by the government and its contractors. And this request was ambiguous in its meaning, and it refers to the UFO and UAP, but apparently this physical debris recovered by personnel from the Department of Defense has residue of a flotsam shot off material of crashed UAPs, unidentified flying objects. I guess the FOIA request is in this report. We're looking at it. What's your thoughts on this, Dr. J?
I agree with Rich. It's definitely missing a lot. But at the same time, we've been in this soft disclosure for quite some time, and this is just more of it. Now, as far as the time frame, like you said, 2017, and obviously I'm guessing because the words UAP and UFOs are used as opposed to AAV or even earlier than that, flying saucer. Since it's not AAV, Advanced Aerospace Vehicle, but in fact it says UAP, I would guess this has to be sometime in the last 20, if not 30 years. Another really interesting thing I want to note is when it talks about layering metals or metal and plastic, that actually reminds me of some of the so-called metamaterials that came from crashed spacecraft. Two of them that Linda Moulton Howe has been researching, one that she has in possession, another that she has sent off to the Department of Defense for testing, which is actually surprising. Why does it take a private citizen to send UFO debris to be tested when they're the ones in the first place to have it? And what was really interesting, she noted that the material that she has, it too is layered. Now, I know she said bismuth and it's layered in between 1 to 4 microns as far as each layer, and then between that, I believe, is 99.5% aluminum and I think she might have said nickel, but don't quote me on that for sure. But either way, the layering that this article is talking about for this specific nitinol, I believe it's what it's pronounced, with titanium plastic, is again in a line with what other research has told us about this metamaterial, and also confirms with what George Knapp recently said, that we will start to hear about these metamaterials being talked about publicly, which it seems to be the case in this new article.
Absolutely, Dr. J. And, you know, it's amazing. Some people might say that disclosure may never happen, but according to this documentation received, it appears that the retrieved debris exhibits other extraordinary capabilities, in addition to remembering their originality from when it was bent and crushed, like you said, Dr. J. Some of these futuristic materials have the potential to make things invisible, they also state, compressed electromagnetic energy, and even slow down the speed of light. This is insane stuff. If this is true, the implications are big. They say, although much of the report's details are redacted, what can be gleaned is that these technologies represent a literally huge quantum leap beyond the properties of all existing material known to man. So is there a meta propulsion that we have in our possession? Is this real? What's your thoughts on this FOIA request? You've been looking at it over there. Michael from Dark Hour Paranormal, what's your thoughts?
You know, I listened to what Rich said, and I totally feel his frustration. I'm listening to what Dr. J is saying, and I agree that this is still some sort of form of soft disclosure. You know, when I first looked at this article, we have a couple pictures up at the top, and I don't know for sure if those are representative of what's actually being spoken about, or if those are something more symbolic visually. But the material the guy is holding reminds me of some of Phil Schneider's samples. If you see some of these old videos on VHS that are still around, you know, when he would travel around, he had material that had some sort of memory or reshaping ability. You know, this particular, I mean, I understand we do have some materials that have some of that capability, but this example seems much more extreme. And in the article, it even mentions that, you know, some of our more known materials that we're able to do some of these things with might be reflections of sort of a back engineering or a way to mimic some of the material that we've found, of course, not completely understanding. We have many different different samples of that along the way, of course. That being said, Sons of Guns had it all along. Okay, that's my thought, too. And I think we're going to see more of this in the future here. Again, of course, the way that George Knapp had highlighted it, and so many others to say. But they've had this technology all along, and I guess it just took a Freedom of Information Act to very casually draw it out of them. You know, it took 3 years for this to go through, and I understand that. Understanding patents even take longer. But, you know, if the government was willing to give us just a little bit, hey, listen, this is them uncovering the keyhole so we can get a good look inside. But that's all we're getting right now. We're just able to see what's in the keyhole. So, you know, I think that, yes, we do have these materials on hand. We've had them for a long time. I think these articles that come out in this way are just really solidifying our suspicions. And definitely they are something to take collectively, as opposed to, you know, just one-off here and there, or we didn't hear about it after that. But look at the scores of other ones that are starting to come out, or the other things people are saying that have notoriety and carry weight. So this is very interesting. And yeah, I do think that these samples that we have in front of us are legitimate.
You know, the paperwork, it seems to be legitimate. I hope it's true. But according to this FOIA request, some of the information that was received is that this meta material, coined in relativity, a recent word, which is interesting. We've been bringing up the meta propulsion craft, and they're saying that meta material is a recent word that's being used. But it's believed to be a material engineered to have property that is not found in naturally occurring materials whatsoever. Some of these materials appear to be assembled of multiple elements, fashioned from composite materials such as metals and plastics, these composite media can be engineered, exhibiting unique electromagnetic properties made up from sub-wavelength, they say, building blocks, such as even negative refraction to be even realized. So I don't know if this is some of the greatest news that we've received recently, that this could be the new technology that we'll be seeing soon, or do you think the Pentagon is going to hold tight to this information, or do they even have this technology at all? Rich?
Well, we know one thing, that Bigelow is supposedly testing this stuff. Now, portions of the reports here center on next-generation amorphous metals like liquid metal or metallic glass, which are novel engineering alloys with disordered atomic scale structure. Metal is crystalline in its solid state, which means it has a highly ordered arrangement of atoms. Amorphous metals, though are crazily disordered, a metal-like material so unique that it's believed it may one day replace plastic and metal in many applications, which is unbelievable because it's going to be exactly the same stuff we heard in Roswell. That this stuff is very light, you can barely feel it in your hand, you can crumple it up and watch it unfold right before your eyes into its natural state, whatever that is. It's wild, man. It's like liquid metal, Terminator 2 type of stuff and beyond. But it seems that Bigelow has the contract to, I guess what he's doing is to construct specialized modified facilities to hold the material for testing. So I guess he's working on it and doing whatever he can to these specially modified facilities that require, technical services, which is the nature of this anomalous debris. It's amazing stuff. It's crazy. It's the future, and it may be right now. We're looking at it. We're reading about it. It is a soft disclosure. I get it. Talking about it is like disclosure in a way. So the fact that it's out in the open and they're mentioning this type of material, liquid metal. Years ago, we used to look at the Terminator 2 movie and yeah, right. But deep down, you're like, yeah, it's going to happen. We may be seeing the beginning of that, or at least hearing about it.
Absolutely, Rich. And what's crazy too is that the Bob Bigelow, he's a mystery in himself. He was the man to go to for the FAA pilots if they encountered any UFOs. The pilots were not told to report it to the FAA. They were told to give all their information to Bigelow, and then Bigelow bought Skinwalker Ranch, blah, blah, blah. He paid off MUFON over and over to get the information. Now he's got this information. Dr. J, is this good news?
I absolutely think so. And let me say one other thing about, a couple things about Bigelow. Like you just mentioned, he bought Skinwalker Ranch. It was because he bought Skinwalker Ranch that Harry Reid decided to award him and his company, Bigelow Aerospace, known as BASS, the $22 million ATIP program money. And another thing, too, that aside from testing the metamaterials that people like Bob Lazar, saw at S4, and a person that we had the pleasure of speaking to prior to his death, Jesse Marcel Jr., when in 1947 at age 12 actually had the memory metal in his hand and squeezed it and let it go. And of course it went back to its, again, what, like Rich said, whatever natural shape it was. But Bigelow also has allegedly a full operating craft. It very well may be the sport model that Bob Lazar was talking about. And another thing, too, with regards to the details of the material, let me read this for you real quick, along with one of the metamaterials. It says, may induce invisibility by manipulating refraction, reflectivity, and increasing light absorption. The reports use terms like optical isolation and transparency and make reference to a meta-mirror technology. Well, if you recall, in, I believe it was the early 2000s, when Mexico, the military were looking for drug smugglers, and they ended up using FLIR, and infrared, essentially, forward-looking infrared. And even though they couldn't see with their naked eye craft, they saw them in FLIR. So hence, they were invisible. Another thing, too, when Bob Lazar actually saw the sport model being tested right outside S4, we're not talking when he went out with John Lear outside of Area 51 and S4 and watched it from miles away, but when he was up close and personal with the craft as it was operating, when he said it lifted up silently, went a little to the left and went a little to the right, he said, standing underneath the craft, you could not see it if you were looking straight up. And the reason is because the gravity literally bent the light around it. So my question is what is causing this light to be bent? Because that's essentially what it would take to make a craft invisible. We would need to bend the light around it. So I'm curious if any of this metamaterial has any materials like element 115, the heavy element that Bob Lazar said, the stable one at least, the stable isotope, that allows you to bend light and space-time, essentially, the fabric of space-time.
You know, that's incredible, Dr. J, because it says in the documents, in some of the pages, like 18, 27, and page 6, they said they're able to slow down light and bring light to a complete standstill and compress energy in nitinol as a biomaterial. New materials based on perfect absorbers of light, novel optical isolators. This dialogue, this verbiage is beyond belief. It's insane. They're actually saying that they could bring light to a complete standstill. What's the ramifications of that? Can you get your mind around that, Michael, from Dark Hour Paranormal?
You know, it's really interesting because I'm very curious to know where the power is going to come from to achieve an effect like that. You know, in any experiment or anything that's been reported in the past that people have dabbled with very high energy technology, that's always been a question. Where did it come from? You know, we can talk about the metaphysical implications of that and how you could possibly and theoretically create certain energetic loops through time based on, 20-year increments or so. But again, this is all theory. You know, in looking at these documents and some of the other documents that we've come across recently, it's really come to my attention that most of these physics that we're looking at, the quantum physics and, so forth, Einstein's theory on the larger scales and more exact, they're just theory for us. I think that there are people who this is reality for, and they've already been playing with it. I mean, listen, they have this technology, and they're going to be brazen enough to give us something. Yes, there was lots redacted there, but again, I don't think we're going to actually have it in our hands anytime soon. It's sort of like, dangling that carrot there. Hey, we have it, and you can see it, but you can't touch it. You can't interact with it. It's something proprietary for us, and until they use it to whatever degree they like, that's when they'll actually give us something possibly on the consumer end. And I use the word consumer very lightly because you could be very creative with these sort of things. But again, to get back to your question there, I really can't figure out, again, with our Newtonian physics, how that's going to work. So they must be working with something else. There's another modality of physics that they have conquered and mastered enough to understand the material and then understand the propulsion and then put it all together to create something that, listen, in my mind, I believe whatever they put together is probably safe to travel in. I can't tell you why, because I'm sure that there are many things they've done, and through their own research, they've come across that, whether this be something where, you have an accident in the sky. Us, we might think about a parachute. Let's jump out physically and get to the ground. Well, some of these crafts may have the capability of changing frequency or even changing their alchemy in certain ways, electrically or magnetically, or even just through, some sort of remote control. This is very interesting, and I really do, again, think that there is something here. And again, if we put the pieces together, like sitting in front of a jigsaw puzzle, I think the picture is going to slowly come together for us.
I hope it happens. I hope we do get the information that we deserve. It sounds like there's a lot of technology that's not within our grasp yet, but apparently the Pentagon's got the debris from the Roswell crash. This is incredible. I don't know why the major news isn't following up on this. I got about 1 minute, 20 seconds. Do you think the major media, Rich, is going to give us anything on this?
No, not at all. They have no reason to. It's I think the media likes talking about it, but there's only one place that usually does all the talking. So I don't think this article is going to make it to mainstream media at all.
Dr. J, what do you think? Is the major media going to pick up on this? This should be the biggest breaking news in regards to technology that should be ours right now.
Normally I would say no, but in light of General Ished being taken seriously, that story going around the world over multiple times, when Tom DeLonge first came out and said he has proof of extraterrestrial metal, and that made all the mainstream media networks, it's a possibility, but at the same time, how many times have we been hopeful that this would be coming out in the news? And yet we didn't see it. Let me throw in one other interesting thing here, too. I'm actually surprised that this came from the DIA with that much information, because I've always argued that ever since the Freedom of Information Act, all the good stuff is locked up in private military contractors, such as Bigelow Aerospace. So the fact that the DIA knows this much detail and they released it is a pretty good sign.
Let's hopefully we find out. It is good timing. This is exactly what we want. And I think disclosure could be coming around the corner. You just never know. I know there's going to be a lot of Countdown to Disclosure coming up in Countdown to Disclosure, our documentary coming out February 16th, 2021, just in a few days, streaming on all services. So it's going to be incredible. One last thing. I know Michael from Dark Hour Paranormal is coming up with an episode on Third Phase UFO Report, along with Rich Goofon is going to be posting up something in the near future on Third Phase UFO Report in the next few hours. So everybody buckle up for that. Keep your eyes on the skies. Be safe out there. Blake Cousins, we'll see you next time.
In just 50 minutes from now, well within the hour, the moon is due to have visitors from another planet.
Former astronaut Wally Schirra at his side.
Man on the moon.
That moment, without Walter, inconceivable.
Oh, boy.
Man's dream and a nation's pledge has now been fulfilled. The lunar age has begun. Now indelible. It's going to be remembered as long as man survives.
I look at the old coverage now and see such innocence, such optimism. Where did it go? Has technology moved so quickly in 50 years that we've forgotten the immensity of the achievement?
You're looking at the lunar surface.
An estimated 125 to 150 million Americans watched the Apollo 11 moon landing. flag on the moon. It had to be understood in the context of the Cold War as our delayed answer to the Russians sending a satellite into space first.
How easy these words are rolling off our lips now. Man on the moon, a walk on the moon. And yet to say the words and to stop just a moment to think about them still sends a shiver up and down the old spine.